And today we are on 1 Samuel chapter 19. You remember last week, just a little review. David and Saul had some problems. Saul was jealous of David. And so he said that he was going to give David his daughter in marriage. His oldest daughter. What happened to that? He's going to give his oldest daughter to David in marriage. Gave him to somebody else then. Remember that? But then he said, well, I have another daughter, Michal, and she loves David. I'll give her to David, but I'll put a little extra deal in there. To have Michal's hand, he has to go kill 100 Philistines. And what did Saul think would happen?
That David would die.
That David would die and be killed. But David surprised Saul, and not only did he kill 100 Philistines, but what?
200.
He killed 200 of them. And he finally felt, I guess, worthy to marry a king's daughter. Well,
is that like going the extra mile?
yeah, maybe that's... Yeah, if you kill one Roman, kill two Roman. No, that's different, I think. But David was a very valiant and strong warrior. And it's great to see Bob here today and Sonia. And we're just going over David from chapter 18 before we start 19. So he married Michal. And so David was well respected by all the fighting men, that's for sure. Well, let's begin with 19:1. Now Saul spoke to Jonathan, his son, and to all his servants that they should kill David, but Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted greatly in David. Wow, that's a pretty strong statement, isn't it? Here you have a king, and he's saying, hey guys, we got to kill David. What do you think the servants were thinking of that? We don't...
Afraid.
Huh?
Probably afraid.
Probably afraid, because it's almost like, it's not quite a command from the king, but when the king speaks, people listen. And here's the king saying, we got to get rid of this guy. Who does that remind us of? Somebody once said in history, someone must take care of this fellow. And,
It was Christ.
Yeah. And so he was taken care of. So Saul's getting the message out. You got to take care of this David. And I'll put it plain Hebrew. Kill him. And so Jonathan, though, was friends with David, and he was upset. So let's see what happens. What's Jonathan do? Verse 2. So Jonathan told David, saying, my father Saul seeks to kill you. Therefore, please be on your guard until morning and stay in a secret place and hide. So this is a good thing, isn't it? That Jonathan was able to get the warning to David. Otherwise, he might not have made it through the night. Because one of the servants of Saul might have heard. Yeah. But he uses what we call secondary means. So he protected him through Jonathan's word. And Jonathan got the word to David. So David hightailed it to a secret place. But this shows how much Jonathan loved David. Do you think Jonathan loved David more than he loved his own father?
Yeah.
Sounds like it, doesn't it?
I don't think he respected him.
Didn't respect his father, and he respected David.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do about that fifth, what's the commandment? Third commandment? Honor your father and your mother. How's that enter into this? Would it be to honor your father and mother to go do what your father said if it's to kill somebody? That wouldn't really be honoring your father. But you get into this, in some domestic abuse families and stuff. Maybe who've been raised that you got to honor your parents. And that's hard for them. But here we see Jonathan loved David more than his own father. That doesn't come right out and say that, but I think we can infer that. So 3. So Jonathan continues to talk, and he says, "And I will go out tomorrow morning and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. Then what I observe I will tell you." So it's almost like when he told him in verse 2, "Go stay in a secret place and hide." Do you think they already had the secret place spotted out? Yeah. Somewhere in this field there's this secret place. Because he says in verse 3, "In the field where you are." So he knew where David was going to be going. So, and I'm going to talk to my father, and what I hear I'll tell you. Okay, so 4. Thus Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, "Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he's not sinned against you, and because his works have been very good toward you." Do you think that took some courage on Jonathan's part? Yeah. To speak up to your father sometimes is difficult, isn't it? Especially to go against his wishes. Because what was Saul's wishes concerning David? Kill him. And what's David saying to Saul? What would that be if he killed David? That'd be murder. That'd be a sin. That's against the 10 Commandments. Why are you doing that?
You know, it takes courage for us to tell a brother or sister, "You're sinning," when it's black and white. But also, more so, it probably takes courage to look at ourselves and point fingers back at ourselves and say, "That's a sin. Stop it."
Right. That's what Jesus said. He said, "Before you take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own." But here, Jonathan is protecting the life of, he knows he's God's anointed king, David. And he wants David to reign as king. And so he's telling his father, he said, "Boy, I just hope you won't do this, because that's a sin. And he's done great things for you." And he's going to tell him about that in verse 5. "For David, he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood to kill David without a cause?" Whoa. That's pretty strong language to a king, let alone his own father. But do you think Jonathan had a sense of right and wrong, didn't he? He knew that what his dad wanted to do is wrong. Are there some people that don't know right from wrong? Yeah, that's interesting, because it seems like there's something in us naturally that when we get to a certain age, we kind of know right and wrong. But then again, there are those who've been raised in such a way that they get to an age, and it's almost like they don't know right from wrong.
Sounds like politicians.
Yeah, there you go. That's like the Congress is not going to have a nativity display out in front of Washington, D.C. this year. Oh, I'm not going to go that way. Couldn't find 3 wise men. Okay. Paul?
Made this a question. When you question somebody for them to answer not particularly you, but themselves, it brings it closer to reality of what they want to get across to them. Instead it says, "You got to do this," or "You should do this," it says, "Why don't you?" or "Why are you?" And put it in a question form to where a person says, I got to think about that.
Yeah, it's like he's hoping he will reconsider as he sends out this question, because Jonathan is not in his dad's face saying, "You should not kill David," is he? It's not the way he's doing. He's throwing this in a question. Maybe he's very meekly saying, "You know why? He helped you. He killed the Philistine. Why would you do this? Why would you kill him? That's a sin." And he's saying that in that way to Saul. So, in 6, Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan. And Saul swore, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be killed." So, does that, the fact that he changed his mind, does that say or reflect anything on to Jonathan? Maybe he was a persuasive.
Said he
Person.
listened to his voice.
Yeah, so he heard him. He was not obnoxious in this way, and he did it in a questioning manner, in an honorable way. And maybe he caught Saul on one of his good days, because gets this evil spirit now and then. But he said, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right. He did kill that Philistine, and that was good for all Israel. So he heeded the voice of Jonathan, and then he swears, as the Lord lives, he shall not be killed. Do you think that's really the intention of his heart? Well, later we're going to find that's not. But does it turn out to be true? Yeah. He doesn't kill him. Although he's going to try again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He just told Jonathan, but he had told all his servants to kill him, so how did that get conveyed to them?
Yeah, maybe he went back and between Jonathan and Saul said, look, I've sworn. It's not stated in here. But if it went out and Jonathan said, hey, the king has sworn not to kill David, and maybe that word gets around. Okay. So 7, then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. Wow. What's this say about Jonathan?
Too trusting.
He's trusting?
Too trusting.
Too trusting. But what's he trying to be? What is Jonathan? What would he? Mediator. Yeah, like Jesus is the one mediator. He wants to bring people together, doesn't he? That's what he's trying to do. So he goes to his dad and talks to him about it. And then he goes back to David, his friend, say, here's what's going to happen and everything. And then he brings David back in Saul's presence.
But Saul promised not that he should swear on the Lord.
Yeah, and he swore he wouldn't kill him. So Jonathan's taken his dad and king at his word, and he wants to get them back together face to face. Right? Because that's the way they were before.
Kind of interesting verse in Deuteronomy. It says, provide atonement, because I think Jonathan was thinking that the Lord would hold the murder of David against the people of Israel. And because since Saul was the leader, provide atonement, O Lord, for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed, and do not lay innocent blood to the charge of your people Israel. And I thought that was, and the atonement shall be provided on their behalf for the blood.
So that's probably Jonathan saw that and said, you're going to take innocent blood if you kill David. Don't do
Well, if he
that.
held against the people, because the king.
Yeah, and the whole Israel would suffer. Okay, and also I think of Jesus' words where in his Beatitudes he said, blessed are the peacemakers, didn't he? Jonathan's a peacemaker. And I think of the words in James. James, unfortunately, I think is a rather neglected book to us, but there's so many practical things in James. And one of them, he says, and James was Jesus' brother. And when you read James, you see a lot of the words and thoughts of Jesus in there. And he said, a harvest of righteousness will be poured out in peace for those who make peace. Isn't that beautiful? I said that. A harvest of righteousness will be poured out in peace for those who make peace. That's what Jonathan's doing. He's trying to make peace in the family, in the court. And he's going to one side, he's going to the other side, and then he finally brings them together. Just like old times. Not too long, though. Just like old times. David can sit and play his harp, and Saul, Jonathan's dad, will be calmed and listening to that. That's what he wanted to restore. So he's a peacemaker.
Of course, that's pretty brave of David, too.
Yeah.
Because just a couple of days ago, Saul threw a spear at him.
Yeah, he tried to
Pin him to the wall.
pin him to the wall. So I think that shows his trust in Jonathan. And that's very true in a lot, even in political or business negotiations, you have to be able to trust your mediator, don't you? You have to be able to trust it. and just as we can trust our mediator, Jesus Christ, fully. So David trusts his mediator, Jonathan. Okay, so then verse 8. And there was war again. Oh, stop right there. Because you know what? That seems like that could be said in Israel every year since 1948. Doesn't it? And there was war again. Even to today. It just continues on. And there was war again. So this is nothing new. Okay, and David went out and fought with the Philistines and struck them with a mighty blow, and they fled from him. Well, that should be good news, right? He struck them with a mighty blow, they fled away. He's the leader of the army. But guess what happens? 10. Now the distressing spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand. And David was playing music with his hand. Oh, never trust Saul when he's sitting with his spear in his hand. This is a setup just like it was before, wasn't it, the last chapter? And David's playing his music, and I'm sure he's kind of looking at Saul, and he's holding that spear, and he's just watching him as he's playing. And what do you think this distressing spirit, what's the characteristic of this distressing spirit that's coming on him now? What do you think? How would we describe it?
It said
Vengeance.
the spirit was from the Lord.
Yeah, we talked about that, didn't we, last week? How is this spirit from the Lord?
That wasn't here.
Yeah, Barbara?
The Lord is, the God has removed his presence from Saul. Saul is no longer recognizing the Lord. So that leaves him wide open for every evil spirit in the world.
Right, so he'd already removed his spirit because Saul had disobeyed God's commands before, and now God had already chosen David and already anointed him through Samuel. But it's interesting, it's kind of like the spirit comes and goes, even the good spirit comes and goes. But now it's the evil spirit on him. But God's in control. That's all we can say. God's in control, yeah.
It's like a state of depression. You're depressed, and when he gets depressed, he gets evil.
Yeah, it's a depression. He's evil.
He's overcome with jealousy.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. He's jealous. He's envious. Because he's just, this is related right to the verse before it, that David went out and had a big victory. Yeah.
But it couldn't be an evil spirit from the Lord. It has to be just distressing because God can't send evil, can he? I'm asked, I don't.
Okay, well, what about that, Rob?
Where else would spirits come from? And from God. He's created them all. Some of them have followed Satan. And if we look at the book of Job, Satan had direct access to God and his throne. And he sent him out and said, do whatever you can do to test and prove Job. So I don't, this doesn't disturb me too much. The spirit is from the Lord, and I ask, where else would he come from?
So,
The Lord allowed.
okay, the Lord allowed. Yeah.
Not as much from as he allowed.
John?
If you read 1 Samuel 14, but the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servant said to him, surely a distressing spirit from God is troubling you.
Uh-huh.
So clearly back prior to where we are here, Saul was having some real trouble. But the fact that it says that the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, which makes her come.
Yeah, it departed from Saul and an evil spirit.
Yeah.
Let me put it in another way. How about you remember Cyrus or even the Babylonian Empire? Were they good people, or was that good army that did good things? But did God send them? Yeah, God sent them to bring punishment to his people for their idolatry. So it's like God can use good and evil to bring his will about. And like Ralph was saying, Job, Satan actually had to go and ask God, didn't he? Can I go and try this guy? Because he's going to turn his back on you. And God gave him permission, said, yeah, go for it. So in a way, that's from God. Yeah.
We could ask ourselves the question, what distresses us and what lifts us up? And when we get in the muck and the mire of the world, we can see how that spirit works. Hate can come, jealousy can come, all kinds of bad things can come. We look into the Word of the Lord and to elevate ourselves into the mind of Christ. We have those two things in this world to deal with, and we choose. If we don't choose, then we're puppets.
Yeah, I think, I keep going back to James. Yeah, go ahead, Will.
I'm having a real hard time here.
Mm-hmm.
Because God is pure love. And if God is pure love, then God is not or cannot produce evil. Evil came about by itself, I believe, through the angel that mocked God. And so I think that the evil God allows, but I don't think God created the evil. I think evil came about as a thought of one deity, let's say, saying that I can be as good as you.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, the only thing that troubles me is for us to put the word evil in the place of distressing. The Bible says, my Bible says distressing.
Uh-huh.
So that's the only thing that troubles me is I don't think that we should be saying evil spirit.
Well, let's hold this thought and let's turn to the book of James. You'll find James toward the end of the New Testament after what book? Hebrews. It's after Hebrews and it's before 1 Peter. And I'd like us to go and read James chapter 3. And would somebody read verses 13 through 16? James 3, 13 through 16.
Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show it by his good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual of the devil. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So here, do you think these verses describe Jonathan or Saul?
Saul.
Saul, yeah. He's got self-seeking, he's got bitter envy, and it says that is earthly and demonic. And then it says, for where envy, we just saw, he's envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. It's a demonic spirit of self-seeking, of envying, of jealousy, and that's not from above. It's a demonic spirit. Yeah, Paul?
I'd like to continue reading that.
Yeah, let me stop right here because I'm going to get into the other one.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is wisdom from below, okay? But what is wisdom from above? Paul, you want to read 17, 18?
Wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace.
And that's the verse I just quoted earlier. But listen, I like the New King James translation because it says, wisdom is pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield. Do you see that? How many of us are willing to yield? Full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. And this is James under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit saying this. You know, there are times when we must yield. Do you think Saul was willing to yield? Well, he said, I'm not going to kill him. So he yielded in that, didn't he? For a time. He yielded and said, I swear I'm not going to kill David. But this evil spirit came in with these qualities of self-seeking, bitter envy, jealousy. These were evil. Now, we want, and we know that God is love. That's in the scriptures. God is love. So the dilemma is, how can we have evil, right? Will, if God is love. Evil comes from the Satan, the one who defied God in his own ambition and thought he was the most beautiful angel and spiritual creature. Is that what you're thinking? Am I saying that?
Well, yeah, exactly. But it also, it keeps going back in my mind to where God being all-powerful and all-knowing would not create evil. God could not create evil. Why would he? Why would God create evil before the foundation of the world? I don't understand how that could happen, because my understanding is that God created all things for good, and then evil came about through pride. And if God created that being that he knew beforehand would become evil, why would he do that?
Okay, Bruce.
Well, yeah, and along those lines, I guess, I agree, because when God created man, man was perfect, but through man's sins, and particularly when the world became evil, God destroyed it with the flood.
Okay, so man was created evil. I guess the question is, it was created good. The question is, where did the serpent come from? First, Nancy, and then Lois.
Well, it seems that for however evil existed, there's two problems. The first one is that we have choice, just like angels had a choice. So there was a perimeter to choose from. And when wrong choices are made, because of who God is, he uses and does use evil in ways that turn out to be his will. As utterly sad as it sounds, God uses evil and stands in the world for his purposes.
Yeah.
Even if we don't understand how it is working, but a perfect God cannot create something which is not within himself.
Okay, this is what I'm hearing in the discussion. God is good and cannot create evil,
Yes.
but evil is there because of man's pride and free will.
Yes.
But God then can use and direct that evil that is there.
Yes.
I think Lois had her hand up next.
Well, I'm reading, my version said, now a distressing spirit from the Lord came upon Saul, not an evil spirit. Maybe a distressing spirit came upon from the Lord, but then...
Yeah, it was distressing.
Saul saw evil.
Now what we did though before, remember we talked about what was this distressing spirit, and someone over here said jealousy. And then we just read in James where it said this is from the earthly, sensuous jealousy and envy, which is evil. In James 3 says that. And it is. It's divisive. It's jealousy. It's envious. And that's evil. And that's distressing to people. Because what we're seeing very particularly is Saul is jealous of David.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Yeah, Barbara?
We need to remember too that God wants us to come to him with love. He wants us to love him. He wants us to choose him. And he's given us that opportunity, that choice.
Right, that's like the old parable of holding the butterfly in your hand and saying, you will love me and I keep you, but you have to let go and the butterfly will come back. And God doesn't create us as puppets on a string, love me, because that's not love. Love is given freely. And that's what he does in creation. Okay, first, Will.
Well, jealousy is not a bad thing in the beginning, because even God said himself that he was a jealous God. But so that makes jealousy a righteous thing, in my opinion.
Well, when we have things according to God, even anger can be good with God because it's righteous anger. But we don't say, well, Jesus overturned the money table so I can be angry too. We don't do that because we're not Jesus. We're not God too. That's the other thing. Bruce?
But when jealousy becomes the dominant factor in someone's life, you become more self-centered instead of God-centered, I think. And maybe this was the case with Saul. He was so jealous of David because of his own wishes or thoughts and self-centeredness that he was looking the wrong way.
Right. Okay, Nancy?
There are some studies that have been done on the character of Saul, and some people think that Saul might be an example of a person who's clinically depressed. He acts strangely, he's violent. The music, he plays music, David does, he feels better. So Saul may have some physical problems too in his depression, which makes a difference in his behavior. I don't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
I think that James 3:16 really tells it, for where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there.
Well, that sounds pretty much like Saul, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Envy and self-seeking, then that's every evil thing is there. Let me ask you this. What do you think is the root of sin, or the number one sin, if we could name it? We've been talking about envy and jealousy. What do you think maybe the root sin is?
Pride.
Pride. Do you think Saul was proud?
Yes.
He wanted to be king. I'm king, right? He's proud. We see that all through. Pride then leads to jealousy, envy, anger, all this kind of stuff. You could almost say that pride is the source of these sins. Even in the serpent, Satan. He wanted to control the world, right? He wanted them to do what he said. And so he cast doubt. So did God say that? You're not going to die. And so, because he wanted to use his pride as the evil one. And so pride is the source here, and I think this is what we're seeing in Saul. His pride is leading to all this distressing envy and contentiousness between him and David. Yeah.
I wonder if and the problem in our discussion is that we're assuming this is a supernatural or demonic spirit that God said, go and torment Saul. But in reality, when God removes his spirit, as Jesus tells us in the parable, other spirits can come in. When God removes his spirit, the spirit of a man is forlorn and harmful to himself. This may mean nothing more than we've already told. God has removed his spirit, and now Saul is stuck with his own spirit, an evil spirit which is from the Lord because the Lord has removed himself from Saul's life.
Right, we talked about the parable of the house that's swept clean, and the spirit goes around and gets 7 other of its friends and goes in there. And so if we want to understand the distressing spirit from the Lord came upon him, maybe we could understand it that way.
If the scripture says pride cometh before a fall.
In Proverbs. And that's what's happening here in Saul's case. He's going to have a great fall, and pride is coming for it. John?
I think we have to go back and realize what Saul had to lose. Saul, like you say, wanted to be king, and he didn't want anybody interfering with his goal of being king.
Right, he wanted the...
And when you're in a power mode, I'm sure several people have been in power positions, you always sense there's people out there trying to get where you are, and it was probably very much so because Saul had absolute authority, and if he didn't like somebody, as many people in the Middle East, they'll have you killed, and that solves the problem.
So it's, and we see this, didn't we, when we went through, did we go through 1st and 2nd Kings in Sunday school? About all the kings. And you saw how they were very paranoid even about their own sons and had them killed because they were jealous and frightened that they might take over their power. So I think this is what we're seeing in Saul. Huh?
It's a combination.
Yeah.
When it says distressing the spirit, when you look at that word itself, it implies that there's many things. Jealousy, anger. So we can't just use it as one definition. There's anger and all kinds of different spirits in that one.
All kinds. Envy and anger and pride and jealousy and all kinds of evil things, like James 3 said. All come together. But when all that comes together, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And you act. Whatever you're thinking about and whatever is in your heart is going to come out and manifest itself. That's why it's so important to guard your heart. And this is what Saul is not doing. So let's go on and see what happens here.
I think I need to correct myself.
Okay.
I made a statement that God, because He's holy and pure, could not create evil. Well, there's this scripture in Isaiah 45:7.
Right.
It says, I form the light and create darkness. I made peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things.
Right.
How should we respond to that?
I think you need to do a word study of the Hebrew there and be guarded by this thing. It's dangerous to take one verse out of context and use it with all the other verses that describe who God is. So when we have one verse that contradicts many verses, then we have to see what is the true reading of that and how we can bring that together. So I would just be hesitant to say, yeah, God created evil, because it says it right here in Isaiah 45. God is all-powerful, God's sovereign. But let's look at the other verses. God is love. In 1 John, we see that. Love is not evil, so we can't, I don't think we can have contradictions in the Scripture. Is that right? So we don't contradict. God is not a contradiction of Himself. He's pure love and righteousness and holiness. So I would just say we need to guard ourselves in that and reading one text. Yeah, I was just waiting for that verse to come out. Isaiah 45. Okay, let's go on here and see verse 10. Here we go again. Then Saul sought to pin David to the wall with a spear, but he slipped away from Saul's presence, and he drove the spear into the wall. So David fled and escaped that night. I got to give David credit because he's got great reflexes. I wouldn't be able to move, A spear comes at you. I don't know how far. Was it from here to the back wall, How far is a pitcher's mound from home?
90 feet.
90 feet. And if it's coming 100 miles an hour, I don't think Saul threw 100 miles an hour. But you don't have much time to figure whether you're going to get out of the way or not, do you? Yeah, Bob?
It reminds me when Bush, the guy threw the shoe at Bush.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he ducked out of the way of that shoe, yeah. Lois?
David had the warning from Jonathan, so he was alert and watching out.
Well, that's interesting, too, because he had just said, David, it's okay to come back in because Dad swore he's not going to kill you.
Do you think
But
David
David
totally trusted that?
So I think David's a wise young man, and he's saying, okay, here's the thing. This is where you get Reagan's famous quote, trust but verify. I got that from David. No, trust but verify. So, okay, I trust John, but I'm not going to take my eyes off Saul with that spear. He's got a spear in his hand. You think I'm going to be tuning my harp while he's got that? No. He's going to keep his eye on that, and it's a good thing he did. He got out of the way really quickly. Paul?
I'm thinking maybe, too, is Saul was just poor spearmanship. But remember, David is a leader to Christ, so he is not going to get killed.
Right. We know how the story ends. Okay, so he escaped that night. Now 11, Saul also sent messengers to David's house to watch him and to kill him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, "If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you'll be killed." Why wait till the morning? Why don't they just go?
That's another one of Saul's kids.
Huh?
David's wife is another one
Right.
of Saul's kids.
That's one of his daughters, Michal. But why did Why did Saul say wait till morning to kill him?
Didn't want to have his daughter killed in the process.
He wouldn't want his daughter to get in the crossfire somehow if they went in there. Apparently David's in the house. That's where he's hiding, maybe in a safe room in there. And the Saul's servants come up. They don't want to create a big scene and bash in the front door or whatever. This is the way it is sometimes. And we see these movies with stakeouts. We'll wait until he comes out. That kind of thing. Maybe that's what they don't want to interfere with Michal or have the chance of her getting injured. So he's in the house. And by the way, is this a single floor or a two-story house? Okay, look at verse 12. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. So it must have been a tall house. Who do we think of when we think letting down through a window? Rahab. How did she get rid of those spies? You remember the spies that came in? She let them down through the window. How about the New Testament? Paul was let down in a basket out the window. They had big baskets back then. He was let out the window. So here, she was let out the windows. First she had to open the shutters and throw up the sash. No, that's the night before Christmas. They didn't have any, I don't think they had glass windows, right? So I don't know, it was pretty cold probably. So she lets him down out the window and he escapes. Now listen to this in 13. And Michal took an image and laid it in the bed, put a cover of goat's hair for his head, and covered it with clothes. It sounds like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Bueller's Day Off. You've always had that, I'll just put some pillows under the blankets and put a wig up there and Mom will think I'm still in bed and I can play hooky. But what strikes you about this verse? Something should strike you about this verse. That it had a household idol. It had an image in the house. What in the world is Michal and David doing with an image in the house? And that's the word that is used for idols through the Old Testament. What's going on? Household gods. Is there any? Yeah.
It reminds you of Judges when all the time that these people did evil in the Lord over and over and over again. Their idol worship.
They didn't get rid of their idols. Do you remember the story of Rachel when she was going back with Jacob? What'd she take? One of the household gods. Where'd she put it? In the camel saddlebag. You didn't know camels had saddlebags. She put it in there. Why did she? What in the world? She's taken one of the idols. You remember the other time when the tribe of Dan was going to move up north, and they went through and took this guy. He was a Levite, and this guy had his own priest in his house. And so the tribe of Dan said, "You're going to be our priest now. Take some of those idols with you." It's all through Judges and other places. In Genesis, they did not get rid of the idols. And they would have this problem until they came back from their exile. And it would not be a problem anymore after that. But we still have idols, don't we? Do we have any household idols? We don't think we think of bowing down or offering incense. We don't stand in front of the TV and offer incense to it or anything, but maybe it takes a lot of our time. Maybe it takes time away from reading God's Word, or the computer, or the telephone, the smartphone especially. Or we take Facebook, yeah. Social media. You read articles about kids nowadays are addicted to social media. Addicted to social media and phones. It's a great invention that we can keep in touch with families and we can see them. But when it becomes obsessive, that's no good. And it's still second best to what? Yeah, to be face to face. But it's never going to take the place of speaking face to face. Hey, I could write a little poem or song. Never going to take the place of speaking face to face, because this is what God created us at. He gave us faces and bodies and fleshed us. In fact, Jesus came. God came to take a body, to speak to us face to face, not with just pen and ink, or not just in Facebook or on a phone. We're glad for those, but we long for something more. We long to be present. Okay, well, let's stop here. This is a good place to stop on 13. Yeah.
Earlier, when we were talking about David marrying Michal, and you said that didn't really work out so hot as far as them getting along.
Later.
Is that later? Because here she protects him. And that kind of confused me when I got to that part.
Yeah, no, they starts out good, as so many marriages do. Started out good.
Oh, so later on.
So later on, when he
7 years later,
when he brings in the ark, he dances. Well, he dances in his diaper. Let's put it that way. That's what it looks like. And he's so happy, and he leads the chorus girls in, and they're bringing the ark up. And guess who's looking out the window at Michal? And she said, I can't believe you're just embarrassing me and yourself, dancing, exposing yourself in front of these chorus girls. And it says, and Michal had no children.